True story. Ungrateful child demanded my home. They now regret that I. Have you ever felt completely used by the people you love most? Have you ever had to draw a line in the sand, knowing it might cost you everything, but also knowing it was the only way to save yourself? Have you ever truly chosen yourself, even when it meant breaking ties with your own flesh and blood? Have you ever felt your own child, someone you poured your entire being into, look you in the eye and lie to you? Or worse, not even bother to lie, but simply reveal a calculating, cold contempt that chills you to the very bone? I have. And that feeling, that devastating realization, taught me the biggest, most painful, and ultimately most liberating lesson of my life. It's a story I never thought I'd tell, but here I am, an old woman finally ready to lay it all bare. It was a Tuesday, I remember it like it was yesterday, the kind of crisp autumn day where the leaves were falling in swirls of gold and crimson, and the air held that promise of winter. My home, this beautiful sprawling house that Arthur and I had built together, was bathed in that soft golden light. I just finished a lovely cup of Earl Grey, the scent of bergamot still lingering, sitting in my favorite armchair by the bay window. I watched the dust motes dance in the sunbeams, a quiet, almost meditative ritual. My thoughts drifted to my roses, a particular variety that Arthur had loved, and I contemplated pruning them later. There was a gentle hum to the house, a comforting quiet that spoke of decades of laughter, conversation, and cherished memories. It was my sanctuary, the very container of my life, my history, my peace. Then the doorbell rang. It wasn't the usual cheerful chime. It was an insistent, almost impatient buzz. I felt a familiar prickle of unease, a tightening in my chest that had become a constant companion around them these past few years. It was Caspian and Serafina, my son and his wife. They arrived, not with their usual breezy, almost patronizing air, the one that implied my life was quaint and simple compared to their grand, modern existence, but with a strange, forced solemnity that immediately set my teeth on edge. Caspian was impeccably dressed, as always, in a suit that looked a little too expensive for his actual profession, his hair slicked back. Serafina, a vision in an uncreased designer dress, clutched a sleek Italian leather handbag and, more disturbingly, a large, ominous-looking black briefcase. Its polished surface seemed to absorb the light, hinting at something heavy and unyielding within. "Mother," Caspian began, his voice surprisingly deep, almost theatrical, as he stepped over my threshold without waiting for a full invitation. "We need to talk about your future." My future? I was 78 years old, still perfectly capable, still managing my home, my finances, my life with quiet competence. The prickle of unease intensified, spiraling into a cold knot in my stomach. Serafina, ever the more direct one, cut straight to it. She walked purposefully to my antique coffee table, the one Arthur and I had painstakingly chosen on our honeymoon in Florence, a piece steeped in our shared history. With a dull, heavy thud that reverberated through the quiet room, she placed the ominous briefcase on its polished surface. The sound felt like a declaration, a challenge. She clicked open the latches, the sharp metallic sound cutting through the air, and revealed a stack of crisp, legal-looking documents, bound neatly with red tape. My heart began to pound a little faster, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. "Is sold," she said, using my first name, a calculated formality that always felt like a subtle stripping away of my identity as mother or grandma, a deliberate distancing. It reduced me, in their eyes, to an entity on a piece of paper, a problem to be solved, rather than a person with a lifetime of love and sacrifice. "We've been talking and frankly we're worried about you. This house. It's simply too much for you to manage now. My home. My beautiful, sprawling, mortgage-free family home. The home Arthur and I had built together, brick by brick, memory by memory. Each creaking floorboard, each sun-drenched window, each scuff mark on the kitchen floor held a story. It was where we raised Caspian, where we celebrated holidays, where we mourned our losses. It wasn't just a house, it was the very container of my life, my history, my sanctuary, filled with the scent of old wood, the faint echo of Arthur's pipe tobacco, and the lingering warmth of countless memories. "Too much?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, though a tremor of indignation ran through it. "I manage it perfectly well, dear. I have Mr. McGregor, a wonderful man, who comes for the heavy gardening work, and Mrs. Henderson is here twice a week for the cleaning. I enjoy tending to the lighter tasks myself, you know? Caspian cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze, staring instead at the legal papers as if they held some profound truth. Mother, be realistic. This house is old. It needs constant repairs. The roof needs retiling, the plumbing is antique, and the heating bill alone must be astronomical. The property taxes are enormous, and it's just so empty for one person. He waved a dismissive hand, as if the silence of my home, my cherished peace, was a sign of decay, not tranquility. Serafina then pushed a document towards me, its edges sharp against the polished wood. We've had our lawyer draft some papers. We believe it's time for you to sign the house over to us. My breath caught in my throat. Sign it over? To them? The sheer audacity, the unblinking gall of it, hit me like a physical blow. The clinical smell of fresh ink on the deed of gift seemed to invade my senses. My name, their names. My home becoming theirs. My hand trembled as I reached out, not to sign, but to grasp the cool, solid edge of the table for support, as if the world beneath me had suddenly shifted. You want my house? I managed to choke out, the words tasting like ash. It wasn't a question, more of a statement of utter disbelief. It's not about wanting, Mother, Caspian said, finally looking at me, his eyes devoid of warmth, filled instead with a cold, almost predatory gleam I'd never seen before or perhaps had simply refused to see. It's about practicality. Serafina's business is expanding, you see. Her luxury pet boutique, Paws and Prestige, is doing incredibly well, and she needs more space for her new line of bespoke pet accessories and organic treats. This property with its large grounds would be perfect for her new studio, a workshop, maybe even a small guest house for clients coming in for exclusive fittings. He spoke as if discussing a perfectly normal, sensible business transaction, not the expropriation of his mother's home. Serafina nodded, her smile tight and calculating, almost imperceptible. We'd be doing you a favor, Isolde. Think of the burden lifted. All that maintenance, the taxes, and we've already found a delightful place for you. She pulled out a glossy brochure, pushing it across the table with a manicured finger. It was for a facility called Serene Meadows Assisted Living. It depicted smiling, unnervingly placid elderly people playing bingo in a brightly lit common room and knitting in identical armchairs. The brochure boasted round-the-clock care and an active social calendar. My stomach churned, imagining the bland meals, the institutional smell, the forced cheerfulness. Assisted living? I repeated, my voice now strangely calm, almost distant. It was as if I was watching myself from above, a part of me already detached, observing this grotesque scene unfold. You want to move me out of my home, my sanctuary, into a facility, so you can expand your pet boutique business? It's for your own good, Isolde, Serafina insisted, her voice saccharine, cloying like stale honey. You'll have friends your own age, lovely staff. No more worries about leaky faucets or climbing stairs. We've even picked out a lovely studio apartment for you, with a view of the rose garden. A rose garden indeed. The roses they were planning to rip out to make way for a workshop, a dog grooming salon perhaps. The sheer hypocrisy, the naked greed, the absolute lack of even a shred of genuine concern for my well-being, was staggering. It wasn't just about the house. It was about them reducing me, their mother, their benefactor, to a problem to be neatly solved, a burden to be shifted, an obstacle to their expansion plans. My memories, my comfort, my autonomy, all utterly irrelevant. That was it. That was the line. The final, most egregious act of disrespect. The ultimate betrayal. All those years of subtle digs, of thinly veiled contempt, of financial demands that bled me dry. They all coalesced into this one horrifying moment. It wasn't just a request. It was a demand delivered with such cold entitlement that it shattered every last illusion I had clung to, every fragile thread of hope that they still loved me, even a little. My heart didn't break. It hardened. Something inside me, something I hadn't known existed, snapped into place with a chilling, resolute click. So how did we get here, you ask? How did a mother, who loved her son unconditionally, who sacrificed everything for him and his family, find herself staring down the barrel of such a blatant, heartless betrayal? Well, it wasn't a sudden descent, you see. It was a slow, insidious erosion, like water wearing away stone, drip by painful drip, over decades. My husband, Arthur, God rest his soul, was a kind, generous man. He was a steady presence, my rock, with a quiet wisdom that I often leaned on. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We worked hard, saved diligently, and always believed in providing the best for our son Caspian. From a young age, Caspian was bright, but he also had a tendency to seek the path of least resistance. He was charming, yes, but often lacked the drive to truly push himself, preferring to let others, usually me, smooth his way. Arthur often worried about this. "Is sold," he'd say, his brow furrowed. "We're doing too much for him. He needs to learn to stand on his own 2 feet. You can't always be there to catch him." I, foolishly, brushed off his concerns, believing my boundless love would somehow harden him into resilience. When Caspian met Serafina, well, she was charming in a way. Very ambitious, very driven, with a sharp, calculating mind that I initially mistook for admirable strength. I thought perhaps that was a good thing for Caspian, that she would be the push he needed. But as the years went by, especially after they married and had their first child, little Leo, I started to see a different side. A colder, more self-serving ambition. It began subtly. "Mother," Caspian would call, "we're struggling with the down payment for our first home. It's such a beautiful place. Perfect for Leo to grow up in. Could you possibly help us out?" Arthur and I, we discussed it. We wanted them to have a good start, to relieve some of the immediate pressure. So we dipped into our savings and gave them a substantial sum, enough for a comfortable down payment on a house far grander than we'd had at their age. It was a gift freely given out of love. We never expected it back. We just wanted them to be happy, to have a solid foundation. Then came the emergencies. Always framed as desperate, immediate crises that only I could solve. A car broke down. Mother, Serafina's car was repossessed. How will Caspian get to his job? How will Leo get to school without a car seat? I remember the panic in Serafina's voice, the tears she shed over the phone. My heart ached for them. I sent them money for a new, slightly used family SUV. Much later, after Arthur had passed, I learned the old car hadn't been repossessed at all. It had been sold for a decent sum, and the money had gone towards a lavish family vacation to the Caribbean that they'd conveniently forgotten to mention. My stomach still clenches when I think of that, the casualness of their deception. There were so many more. A sudden medical bill that insurance wouldn't cover. A once-in-a-lifetime business opportunity that couldn't wait. Each time a new plea, always implying that without my help, their lives, or even worse, the grandchildren's lives, would somehow be jeopardized. "Leo needs new braces and they're so expensive. Could you cover half?" Serafina would send me links to designer clothes for herself and the children, saying, "Oh, is sold, wouldn't Clara look adorable in this? It's on sale, but still a bit out of our budget." And I, foolish, loving me, would often oblige. Why? Because I wanted them to be happy. Because I wanted my grandchildren to have everything. Because I feared that if I said no, they would pull away, and I would be truly alone. Was that weakness? Perhaps. It certainly felt like it. Then, a gaping vulnerability they exploited with ruthless precision. Arthur tried to warn me, more strongly as time went on. "Is sold," he'd say, his voice heavy with concern. "They're taking advantage. You can't keep bailing them out. They need to learn to stand on their own 2 feet. You're enabling them." But I'd always defend them. "They're young, Arthur. They're finding their way. They'll appreciate it, you'll see. Our children are supposed to lean on us." Oh, how wrong I was. How utterly, tragically wrong. After Arthur passed, it got worse. Much worse. It was as if a dam had broken, or rather, as if the last barrier to their blatant exploitation had been removed. They knew I was alone, vulnerable, and perhaps they assumed more susceptible to manipulation. They stopped even bothering with the pretense of emergencies. It became an expectation. My pension, Arthur's life insurance payout. They saw it as their inheritance, just arriving a little early, a personal ATM constantly at their disposal. Caspian would call, not to check on me, not to ask how I was coping with the profound grief of losing my husband, but to say, "Mother, the mortgage payment on our house is due, and we're a little short this month. Could you transfer some funds? The entire principal and interest, if you could manage it." Or, "Clara's writing lessons, they've increased the stable fees again. Could you cover the difference?" Serafina, with her polished veneer, would casually remark, "Oh, is sold, we're looking at a new Range Rover. The lease on the old one is up. We'll need a bit of a top-up for the down payment. And I, trapped by habit and that aching loneliness, would watch my own savings dwindle, quietly sacrificing my own small comforts, delaying a new winter coat, opting for cheaper groceries, forgoing a much-needed dental checkup, while they flaunted their ever-growing opulence. The respect vanished. Completely. Conversations would revolve around their needs, their problems, their desires. My opinions were dismissed with a dismissive wave. My advice ignored with a condescending smile. I became their personal bank, a source of endless funds, without a thought for my own security, my own comfort. They didn't even ask anymore, they demanded. They assumed. They expected. They'd brag about their lavish vacations, trips to Aspen for skiing, 2 weeks in the Maldives, their expensive cars that I often contributed to, if not outright paid for their children's exclusive private schools, while I quietly worried about my own dwindling savings. I remember once I had a health scare. Nothing major, thankfully a benign growth, but it was frightening, a reminder of my own mortality. I called Caspian, needing a comforting voice, someone to just listen to my fear. He cut me off mid-sentence. "Mother, I'm really busy right now. Serafina and I are looking at a new boat, a 30-foot cruiser. Can we talk later? Oh, and by the way, that allowance for Clara's riding lessons, could you increase it by a bit? The stable fees went up again, and her instructor says she's ready for advanced jumping." My own fear, my own need for solace, utterly disregarded, dismissed as an inconvenience. I hung up the phone feeling hollowed out, used and profoundly painfully alone. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Another time I visited their house. It was beautiful, far grander than anything Arthur and I had ever aspired to, filled with expensive, modern furniture and abstract art. As I sat on their plush velvet sofa trying to find a comfortable spot, Serafina casually remarked, "You know, Isolde, it's a shame your house is so outdated. All those old things, they must be a nightmare to keep clean." She said it with a dismissive wave of her hand, gesturing vaguely at my cherished antique sideboard, the one Arthur had bought me for our 10th anniversary. It was as if my home, filled with a lifetime of memories, was nothing more than a dusty antique shop. It was a subtle jab, a constant, insidious chipping away at my sense of worth, another brick in the wall of their entitlement, another sign of their utter disregard for my feelings, my life. I tried to talk to them once tentatively. "Caspian, Serafina," I said, during a strained family dinner where my only contribution seemed to be picking up the bill for the extravagant restaurant. "I'm getting older. My savings aren't limitless. Perhaps we should discuss my financial future. And yours." Caspian just laughed, a loud booming sound that grated on my nerves. "Mother, please. You're fine. You have the house, the pension. You'll outlive us all. Don't worry your pretty little head about it." Serafina just smiled, a patronizing saccharine smile, and deftly changed the subject to her latest business triumph, her plans for a second boutique. It was clear. They had no intention of ever taking responsibility, and they certainly had no intention of letting go of their golden goose. They simply expected the flow of funds to continue indefinitely. The constant demands, the casual disrespect, the way they treated me as an ATM rather than a mother, a person with feelings and needs, it had been building for years. Every phone call was a new request. Every visit was a reminder of their extravagant lifestyle, often funded by me while I lived modestly, always worried about my own future. My own needs were always secondary, if they were considered at all. I had become a utility, a resource to be tapped, not a beloved family member. And the worst part? I allowed it. For years I allowed it, fueled by a misguided sense of maternal duty and a desperate, aching loneliness. But that Tuesday, with the legal documents for my home spread out on my coffee table, and the brochure for Serene Meadows staring up at me, something shifted. It wasn't just anger. It was clarity. A cold, hard, unyielding clarity. What would you have done? How much more could you possibly take before something inside you just broke? For me, it wasn't a break. It was a solidification. A quiet internal revolution. As Caspian and Serafina sat there, patiently waiting for me to sign away my home, my sanctuary, my last bastion of independence, a profound stillness settled over me. All the years of simmering resentment, of feeling used and unappreciated, of watching my financial security dwindle, of my love being taken for granted, It all coalesced into a single undeniable truth. This was not love. This was exploitation. And I was done. My internal conflict was immense, certainly. A lifetime of nurturing, of selfless giving, doesn't just evaporate. There was the guilt, a heavy cloak of it, the fear of being truly alone, of losing the only connection I had left to my son and grandchildren, however tenuous and conditional that connection had become. The image of Arthur, his kind, concerned face, flashed in my mind. He would have been devastated, but he would have urged me to protect myself. And beneath that fear, a fierce protective instinct ignited. Protect myself. Protect my legacy. Protect the memory of Arthur, who had worked so hard to provide for me, not for Caspian's endless whims. I looked at Caspian, then at Serafina. Their faces were impassive, expectant, their expressions a chilling blend of boredom and certainty. They truly believed I would just roll over. A frail old woman easily manipulated, too weak or too sentimental to resist. And in that moment, the last vestiges of my illusions about them crumbled to dust, dissolving like smoke. There was no love left for me to salvage, only a hollow echo of what I had so desperately wanted them to be. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm, the single word resonating with a strength I hadn't known I possessed. I picked up the glossy brochure for Serene Meadows, its carefully staged images of placid elderly people now seeming grotesque. With a deliberate slowness, I tore it in half, then quarters, the sharp tearing sound punctuating the silence, letting the pieces flutter onto the table like fallen autumn leaves. I will not be signing anything. Caspian's mouth dropped open, a comical sight. Serafina's eyes narrowed, a flicker of genuine surprise, then a raw, uncontrolled annoyance crossing her face. Isolde, don't be ridiculous, Serafina began, her voice tightening, losing its practiced sweetness. This is for your own good. We're trying to help you. Help me. I laughed, a short, humorless sound that surprised even myself, brittle as dry leaves. You're trying to dispossess me. You're trying to put me in a glorified nursing home so you can take my home, my last piece of independence, and turn it into your pet accessory workshop. You call that help? My voice remained calm, almost disarmingly so. But there was an unshakable core of steel within it. Get out. Both of you. Now. They sputtered, tried to argue, their carefully constructed composure finally shattering. Caspian started to stammer. Mother, you don't understand. Serafina's face contorted in a furious grimace. But I simply stood up, walked to the front door, and opened it wide, letting the crisp autumn air stream into the room. I said, get out. My eyes must have held something they hadn't seen before. A cold, unyielding resolve, devoid of the guilt and fear they had always relied on because after a moment of stunned, furious silence, they gathered their briefcase, their scattered papers and retreated, Serafina giving me one last venomous glare, a look of pure hatred before Caspian, his face pale, hurried her out. I closed the door softly behind them, the quiet click of the latch echoing in the sudden profound silence. Then I leaned against it, the quiet resolve settling deep into my bones, a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilarating triumph. That same day, with a chilling calm and clarity that surprised even myself, I picked up the phone. The tremor in my hands was minimal, a physical echo of years of suppression, but my voice was steady, unwavering. The first call was to my financial advisor, Mr. Davies, a man I trusted for decades, but who had until now only seen the tip of the iceberg of my financial sacrifices. Mr. Davies, I said, my voice crisp, I need to make some significant changes to my financial arrangements. Effective immediately, I want to cease all recurring payments and allowances to Caspian, Serafina, and their children. He paused, a little surprised, a soft intake of breath on his end of the line. All of them, Mrs. Thorne? The monthly mortgage payments for their home, the car leases for the Range Rover and the Porsche, the private school tuition for Leo and Clara at the prestigious Oakhaven Academy, the monthly allowances for their spending money, the seasonal clothing budgets, all of it. All of them, I confirmed, my voice unwavering, each word a deliberate hammer blow against the edifice of my past enablements. Every single one. And I want to ensure that no future requests for funds, no matter how framed, can be approved without my explicit, written consent. Furthermore, I want to set up a separate, protected fund for my own future, one that cannot be accessed or influenced by anyone but myself, impervious to any claims or demands. Mr. Davies, being the consummate professional he was, simply said, "Understood, Mrs. Thorne. I'll initiate the paperwork immediately. It will take a few days for all the auto payments to cease fully, given the various institutions involved, but I can put a hard hold on any new transfers right away." "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Thorne?" "I've never been surer of anything in my life, Mr. Davies," I replied, a quiet finality in my tone. Next I called my lawyer, Miss Hayes. "Miss Hayes," I began, and I outlined the events of the afternoon, the shocking demand for my home, the brochure for Serene Meadows. I recounted it calmly, clinically, as if describing someone else's nightmare. "I need to update my will. I want to make it absolutely clear that my home, and the vast majority of my assets, will not be bequeathed to Caspian or Serafina. I want to explore options for charitable donations, perhaps to the local animal shelter or the children's hospital, and possibly a small, conditional trust for my grandchildren, but only when they reach a certain age and demonstrate financial responsibility, entirely separate from their parents' influence. Perhaps upon graduating from a recognized university, or after establishing stable, independent careers." Miss Hayes listened intently, her voice filled with professional empathy. "Mrs. Thorne, I'm so sorry you're going through this. This is a terribly difficult situation, but you are well within your rights. We can certainly make those changes. I can also draft a formal letter to Caspian and Serafina, clearly stating your refusal to sign any documents regarding your property, and reiterating your legal rights to your home. Would you like me to do that, and outline the potential legal ramifications should they persist in their attempts to pressure you?" "Yes, please," I said, "and make it very clear that any further attempts to pressure me will be met with immediate legal action for harassment and undue influence. I want no ambiguity." The conversations were brisk, efficient, and surprisingly unemotional on my part. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The fear, the sadness, the emotional turmoil that had plagued me for years around them had receded, replaced by a cold, clear focus. I was simply executing a plan. A comprehensive, precise plan to reclaim my life, my dignity, and my financial independence. I felt a strange sense of liberation, a lightness I hadn't known in years, even as the profound implications of what I had done began to fully dawn on me. The silence in the house after those calls felt different. It wasn't the lonely silence I had grown accustomed to. It was a profound, almost sacred quiet pregnant with the promise of a new beginning. I had drawn my line in the sand, and I knew with every fiber of my being that there was no going back. Of course, my decision was going to have consequences, wasn't it? I didn't expect them to simply shrug and accept it. No, not them. I knew them too well. Their panic would escalate. Their desperation would become a spectacle, and I was grimly prepared for it. The first signs came subtly like distant thunder. A few days after my calls, I received a notification from the bank. "Automatic payment for Serafina Thorne's Range Rover lease has failed. Please advise." Then, a letter from Oakhaven Academy, subtly hinting at overdue tuition for Leo and Clara. Each call, each letter I deflected, politely informing the institutions that I was no longer responsible for those payments, was a small victory, a quiet affirmation of my newfound resolve. It was a satisfaction not malicious but born of a deep sense of justice. Then came the frantic texts. My phone buzzed almost constantly. "Mother, what's going on with the car payment? My lease is about to be terminated. This is ridiculous. Isolde, the school is calling. They say the kids can't come back next term if the tuition isn't paid. What have you done? We're going to lose everything. How could you?" I didn't reply. I simply read them, a quiet, almost serene satisfaction settling over me. Their panic was palpable, their entitlement still blazing through their words. Finally, the inevitable confrontation. It was a Saturday morning, less than a week after my initial decision. I was enjoying my freshly brewed coffee on the porch swing, watching the squirrels chase each other up the ancient oak tree that shaded my front lawn. The crisp autumn air felt invigorating. Suddenly, a car screeched to a halt in my driveway, kicking up gravel. It was Caspian's slightly too expensive sedan, and out he burst, followed closely by a red-faced, furious Serafina, her usually impeccable hair slightly askew. They stormed up the flagstone path, their faces contorted with a mixture of anger, disbelief, and outright panic. "Mother! What have you done?" Caspian yelled, not even bothering with a greeting, his voice hoarse, strained, a raw edge of desperation that was entirely new. Serafina shoved past him, her eyes blazing, losing all pretense of her polished composure. "Is sold. This is insane. The bank is calling about the house. My car is about to be repossessed. The children's school sent a letter about expulsion. Do you know what kind of humiliation this is?" She practically spat the words at me, her voice shrill. I simply looked at them calmly. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the warmth spread through me. "Good morning, Caspian. Good morning, Serafina. Did you enjoy your drive? The autumn colors are particularly vibrant this year, aren't they?" My calmness seemed to enrage them further. "Don't you dare play innocent with us," Caspian roared, taking a step closer, his hands balled into fists. "You've cut us off. All of us. What kind of mother does that to her own son and grandchildren?" "The kind who has finally had enough," I replied, my voice steady, devoid of any emotional tremor, a quiet strength emanating from me that seemed to momentarily deflate their fury. "The kind who finally realized that she was being used, exploited, and disrespected beyond measure. The kind who chose to protect herself." Serafina scoffed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Exploited? We're your family. You're supposed to help us. We're your son, your grandchildren. Think of the children as sold. What about Leo and Clara? Are you going to throw them out of their school, ruin their chances at a good future? Are they supposed to live in poverty because of your spite?" "Spite?" I repeated, a small sad smile touching my lips. "No, Serafina. Not spite. Consequences. My consequences for your actions. And your children's consequences for your choices. Not mine. You chose to live a lifestyle you couldn't afford, relying solely on my generosity. You chose to incur debts far beyond your means. You chose to rely entirely on me, without ever considering my own needs, my own future, my own peace of mind." Caspian's face crumpled. He tried a different tactic, the manipulative, guilt-tripping one he'd used since he was a boy. "Mother, please. Dad would be so disappointed in you. He always wanted us to be a close family, to support each other. He wouldn't want you to do this. He'd be heartbroken." That hit a nerve. My eyes flickered, and a flash of fierce protectiveness for Arthur's memory coursed through me, but I held firm, my voice hardening to steel. "Don't you dare bring your father into this, Caspian," I said, each word precise and cutting. "Arthur worked his entire life, diligently, frugally, to ensure I would be secure in my old age. He would be absolutely horrified to know that his own son and his wife tried to force me out of my cherished home into an assisted living facility, just so you could expand a frivolous pet boutique business. He would be disgusted by your greed and your complete lack of gratitude and responsibility. He warned me repeatedly that you were taking advantage. He foresaw this." Serafina looked as if I had slapped her, her face draining of color. "How dare you? We were trying to help you. This house is too much for you. You're old as sold. You don't understand how the world works anymore. Things are expensive now." "Oh, I understand perfectly, Serafina," I countered, leaning forward slightly, my gaze unblinking, holding hers. "I understand that for years I paid your oversized mortgage, your luxury car leases, your children's exclusive private school tuition, your lavish vacations to exotic destinations. I bailed you out of debt more times than I can count. Emergencies that turned out to be new designer handbags or Caribbean cruises. I sacrificed my own comfort, my own peace of mind, my own security, to fund your extravagant lifestyle. And what did I get in return? Disrespect, demands, entitlement, and ultimately, a legal document demanding my home, and a brochure for a place to put me away like an unwanted antique." I paused, letting my words sink in. The silence was thick, heavy with their shock, their dawning comprehension. They hadn't expected me to articulate it so clearly, so calmly, so factually. They had always relied on my emotional attachment, my guilt, to keep me silent, to keep me compliant. "So no," I continued, my voice unwavering, "I will not be reversing my decision. The money is cut off. Permanently. You are now entirely responsible for your own finances, your own home, your own children's education. just like every other adult in the world who learns to live within their means. It is past time you did the same. Caspian took a step back, his face paling, the color draining from his cheeks. But we don't have that kind of money, Mother. You know that. We'll lose everything. The house, the cars, the kids will be pulled out of school. Their lives will be ruined. That, I said, my voice unwavering, is your problem to solve, not mine. It's time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet, Caspian. It's long past time. The consequences of your choices are now yours alone to bear. Serafina, finally realizing that threats and guilt trips weren't working, shifted to desperate, almost frantic begging, tears starting to well in her eyes. Isolde, please. Don't do this to us. We'll be ruined. Think of the shame. What will people say? They'll say you finally learned the value of hard work and self-reliance. I stated, a flicker of something akin to grim satisfaction, a sense of profound vindication passing through me. Now I believe we're done here. I have a very busy day planned. A day I intend to enjoy in peace, in my own home without your demands. I stood up, signaling the absolute end of the conversation. They stared at me, disbelief warring with anger and a deep, gnawing fear. They tried one more desperate plea, a jumbled mess of apologies and promises, but I simply turned and walked back into the house, closing the door firmly behind me. I didn't slam it. There was no need for theatrics. The quiet click of the latch was enough. The confrontation was over, and I had stood my ground. The trembling in my hands only started after they had driven away, their luxury sedan speeding down the driveway as if fleeing a ghost, but it was a tremor of release, not fear. A deep, cleansing tremor. So what happened next? Well, as expected, their lives changed dramatically. The financial cushion I had provided for decades simply vanished. Serafina's luxury Range Rover was indeed repossessed, a stark symbol of their altered circumstances. Caspian scrambled to find extra work, something he hadn't truly had to do in years, preferring a more leisurely schedule that allowed him to pursue his hobbies, which often involved expensive golf outings and exclusive fishing trips. He eventually took on a physically demanding job, something entirely new for him. Their grand home, the one whose mortgage I had been paying, went into foreclosure. They eventually had to sell it at a significant loss and downsize drastically to a much smaller, far less glamorous place in a less desirable neighborhood. The whispers through the family grapevine were plentiful, and I heard it all, though I never sought it out. Leo and Clara, my grandchildren, were indeed pulled out of their expensive private school, Oakhaven Academy. I heard they were enrolled in public school, which frankly was a perfectly good education, but for them it was a massive shock. I heard whispers through the grapevine that they resented their parents for it, and perhaps for a while they resented me too. That was the hardest part, knowing my grandchildren might see me as the villain, the cruel grandmother who pulled the rug out from under them. But I had to remind myself constantly that their parents' choices, their parents' dependence and greed, had led to this. It was a harsh lesson, but one they all needed to learn if they were ever to become resilient, self-sufficient adults. Their attempts to reconcile were pathetic, to be honest. At first they were still manipulative, trying every angle. Phone calls where Caspian would start with, "Mother, I'm so sorry, we just need a little help to get back on our feet, just until we sell the house." Or Serafina would send me passive-aggressive cards hinting at my coldness and abandoning my family, even trying to enlist other relatives to intercede on their behalf. I ignored them. Or if they persisted, I would send a polite, firm letter through my lawyer, Ms. Hayes, reminding them of the boundaries and the potential for legal action. They even tried showing up at my door a few more times, but each time I simply stated calmly, "My lawyer has advised me not to engage," and closed the door. Slowly over time the desperate attempts tapered off. The silence from them became more consistent, and this time it was a welcome quiet. I heard they were both working, really working, for the first time in a long time, both holding down full-time jobs. Caspian got a more demanding job in sales, and Serafina had to scale back her expansion plans and focus on making her existing boutique profitable without my endless injections of capital. They were forced to budget, to make difficult choices, to live within their actual means, to face the reality of their finances. And I suppose in a strange, painful way they were finally growing up, finally learning the hard lessons of responsibility. And me? My new life. Oh, my dear friend, it has been liberating. Truly, utterly liberating. The constant anxiety, the gnawing worry about their next demand, the feeling of being bled dry, the weight of their expectations, it all vanished. The quiet in my home was no longer lonely. It was peaceful, a deep, resonant calm. I had money in my account, my money, that I could spend without guilt or fear that I was depleting their inheritance. I started taking watercolor painting classes at the local community center, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time or mental space for. I discovered a hidden talent for capturing landscapes and the delicate beauty of my own garden roses. I joined a book club at the local library and made new friends, real friends, who valued me for who I was, not for what I could provide. We discussed books, shared stories, and laughed over cups of tea. I finally took that trip to Scotland, the one Arthur and I had always dreamed of but never got around to. Walking through the misty highlands, sipping a fine scotch in a cozy pub, I felt an almost dizzying sense of freedom. The joy of being able to spend my own money on my own dreams, without a shadow of guilt or resentment, was immeasurable. My house, my beautiful home, became my sanctuary again, more so than ever. I redecorated a few rooms, purged things I no longer needed, and filled it with quiet joy and new memories. I painted my living room a soft, calming sage green, and added new artwork, pieces that spoke to me. I planted a new rose garden in the back, even more beautiful and vibrant than the old one, tending to each bush with mindful pleasure. My health improved remarkably. The chronic tension in my shoulders, the constant headaches, they eased, melting away with the stress of their demands. I felt lighter, freer, more myself than I had in decades. I had found my voice and in doing so found my peace. I learned the greatest gift you can give someone isn't money or endless bailouts, but the opportunity and sometimes the necessity to stand on their own 2 feet. It's about empowering them, even if that empowerment comes from a place of tough love and difficult decisions. It's about teaching them self-reliance, responsibility, and the true value of earning their own way. And in doing so, you also gift yourself the freedom to live your own life, unburdened by the weight of others' endless expectations. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do, severing that dysfunctional tie, but it was also the best. I found my own strength, my own peace, and a profound sense of dignity I thought I had lost forever. That was my story. Our channel is full of life lessons like this one, stories of resilience, of finding strength in unexpected places, and of navigating the difficult truths of life and family. If my story resonated with you, I invite you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. What do you think? Did I do the right thing? Share your thoughts with me in the comments, I'll be reading all of them.